Had you seen a story in Aviation Week that an Illinois hobby club feels like their balloon might have been a candidate for the balloon shot?
I have.
A
I've
week
seen
ago?
that press report.
So, John, I take that to mean you guys don't have any plans to reimburse the bottle cap balloon brigade?
I don't know of any plans to reimburse.
I wouldn't count on it. In fact, I think it's more likely they send a bill for the gas that the jet had to use. Popularity, credibility. These two things are not the same.
Thank you for that insight, Captain Obvious.
I hear you say. With these recent shootdowns over North America, the topic of UFOs has gotten a boost in the media, which I think confers a higher degree of acceptability on this topic in the public sphere. Stick around to the end of the video and I'll give you my own opinion on why I think things unfolded as they did, so you can dissect and criticize me if you so wish. But the sense that I get is that people in the UFO community who have been in it for a while, especially those at the top, the figureheads, think that this heightened popularity means that more credibility is being given to sightings and the phenomenon as a whole. But I don't see this to be the case, nor do I think this will be the case anytime soon. And there are several things that I think turn a lot of people off. I want to look at some of the responses to the recent shootdowns that I think highlight a serious lack of critical thinking and thorough research on this topic, which has made it hard for the general public to take this topic more seriously. There's a heavy trend of conspiracy as an explanation for events like this. People will say that the government, once they shot these things down, that they knew what these things are, or if not, then they know where the debris landed. They're just not telling us. I mean, they're the United States and Canadian governments. How could they not, with all this technology and manpower that they have at their disposal? So how could it be that they can't locate the wreckage? And that's as far as many people go. They'll ask the hows and the whats, albeit incredulously, but don't bother to dive any deeper and ultimately turn towards personalities that present themselves as knowledgeable, but have either become too comfortable or too complacent with their positions within the subject matter and in the community, and are simply coasting on reputation and relying on their community's beliefs, rightly or wrongly, that the government is just always up to something. Now, you may not like some of what I have to say, or in fact, you may not like anything that I have to say, but there are too many wannabe Fox Mulders running around out there, and not enough Dana Scullys reining these people in. First things first, I feel like it's necessary to define what a UFO is, because unfortunately, there seem to be a lot of people out there who think a UFO can only be a technologically advanced craft of unknown origin.
There is this other kind of really nasty element to this whole thing about bringing in UFOs when we're talking about balloons and things like that. The question is why? This is quite significant in my opinion, because what we are seeing is a further twisting by the establishment of what UFOs actually are. And we're going to just siphon all of the value and meaning out of the actual phrase UFO.
If something is unidentifiable, flying or floating, an object of some type, if it's not a UFO, then what is it? Doesn't matter if it's a plastic bag caught in the wind, a man in a lawn chair who tied some balloons together and floated away, or a flock of sea turtles heading south for the winter. Until it ceases to be unidentified, it's a UFO. UFO is just a blanket umbrella term for anything that makes you go, what the fuck is that?
The U.S. has been shooting down objects out of the sky for the past few days, leaving many of us to wonder if we are now at war with sophisticated, unidentified aerial phenomenon.
Dr. Stephen Greer, retired physician, well known throughout the UFO community, was interviewed, and in the start of this interview, he was asked if he thought these were extraterrestrial, which he replied no. So at least we're off to a good start. But he does go on to state that he thinks the recent objects are a diversion.
But this, I believe, is part of a diversion. Well, some people would call it a false flag, to sort of put this on the radar at a time where they want to divert people's attention from other issues, and most importantly, the lawmakers away from the information that they were beginning to drill down on in the last year about the actual origin of UFOs and UAPs.
What I think this represents is someone who has been steeped in conspiratorial thinking for too long, to the point where it's become default, at this point to view large news events of this nature as false flags or orchestrated to divert our attention. He does concede that some of these craft are probably Chinese, but that there's a global organization out there that can deploy craft like these to enrich themselves. He uses the Gulf of Tonkin incident and the US involvement in Iraq as examples of misdirection to achieve some greater goal, usually financial.
The point I make to people is that the organization that deals with this issue isn't U.S. It's global. So if they wanted to deploy assets that would trigger a news frenzy to sort of posit that there's some threat coming, then it would be very easy to gaslight the public and, more importantly, the lawmakers in the White House on this.
Now, it's not off base to suggest that governmental organizations will look for any excuse to justify a larger budget or to use past government misdeeds to help illustrate that manipulation of the public and our own elected officials can and has taken place. There are plenty of verifiable examples, and we should always be vigilant for this. But here's the thing. This occasional fact of past government misconduct has a way of becoming the lens through which all world events are viewed, which leads people down an alternate path far removed from the truth. The next clip is with Dave Scott, another personality in this space, creator of Spaced Out Radio, both a YouTube channel and a terrestrial radio station. The clip is him rejecting the idea that the United States Air Force would use a missile to shoot down a balloon. To be fair to him, he has actually since come around to understanding why a missile would be used as opposed to, say, the guns, which would be cheaper. But I still think this is a good example of hubris.
Now, this is where the propaganda gets in. On a $12 hobby balloon, a jet fighter is not going to engage a $12 hobby balloon or a kite or what can you call it? A remote control airplane, an RC airplane. They're not going to do that. They know what they were looking at. And to sit there and say that, they shot down a $12 hobby balloon, anybody who buys that, come see me, because I have a bridge in the middle of the desert that I would like to sell you for cheap.
So then let's ask the question, why would a $400,000 AIM-9 missile potentially be used against a $12 hobby balloon? Air Force General Van Herk, commander of the United States Northern Command and NORAD, actually addressed this very question in a press briefing not long after the Lake Huron shootdown.
A missile seems like a particularly destructive weapon to be using if there's a desire to investigate and figure out what these are afterwards. Can you explain explain the weapon's choice?
First of all, maintaining a radar track on an object this small is very hard. So taking a radar shot, such as an AIM-120, would be a lower probability of success. We assessed taking a gunshot yesterday in that event as well as today. And the pilots in each situation felt that that was really unachievable because of the size, especially yesterday in the altitude. And also because of the challenge to acquire it visually because it's so small. It's also potentially a safety of flight issue because you have to get so close to the object before you see it that you potentially could fly into the debris or the actual object. Therefore, in each situation, the AIM-9X, a heat-seeking missile or infrared missile that sees contrast, has been the weapons of choice against the objects which we've been seeing.
So one thing that stood out to me immediately was that they considered using the AIM-120 missile to shoot down the Lake Huron object, which, by the way, is $1 million. So that indicates to me that cost wasn't a factor in these scenarios. Which, why would it be? I mean, these objects seemed benign, but as stated, they couldn't rule out that there weren't some other potential data collecting activities going on. And you combine that with the threat to civilian aviation, it's no stretch at all. So the missiles were just the safest option. And during my research into this, I found a former fighter pilot who has a YouTube channel called Max Afterburner, who reiterated some of these same concerns.
Why didn't they use 20 Mike? Why didn't they use the gun to shoot this thing down? Well, there's a chance that you could damage it more with a gun. So some of the rounds, 20 Mike, 20 millimeter, is what will come out of an F-16. Some of those actually have exploding tips, so it could damage this thing more potentially. And then ultimately, you're gonna have to get closer to this. And when it's a really, really slow flying object, which it seems like these things are, we don't know for sure yet, it's dangerous. Because think about it, you're pointed directly at this thing that's not moving. shoot really quick, and then you're going to pull a ton of G's to get away from it. And it's just putting you in a bad position where, I don't know, let's just say some of the fragments that come off of that thing, maybe there's some shrapnel or something from some of this equipment that's inside it, since we don't even know what's inside it. So at the end of the day, you don't want to put your fighter jet in a position where you might be flying through debris, which is why having the standoff of an AIM-9X, which is a short-range air-to-air missile, is definitely the better choice. And it's funny that China's putting out a ton of propaganda that the US is using F-22s and expensive missiles against these objects, when in reality, these F-22s, these F-16s, they're going to fly anyway. So in my opinion, it's better to go up and do.
Next up, we have Jeremy Corbell, who's another large figure in the UFO community as a researcher, documentarian.
Joining me now is a good friend, Jeremy Corbell. He's an independent journalist. He's released some of the most important videos regarding this. Of course, we had to talk with Jeremy about this entire situation.
He was brought on and interviewed about his thoughts on the issue in a video clip entitled, "Jeremy Corbell Debunks Media Lies on UFO Shootdowns." Not that Jeremy is responsible for the title, but I didn't see a whole lot of debunking going on, just a bunch of opinions, in my opinion. The interview starts off pretty basic. What did he think of the topic at large and these specific instances? But then he goes,
"We know there are balloons. We know there are Chinese spy balloons. This is something that has been happening for decades, this specific type. So what we're dealing with is the media all of a sudden grabbing on to these very specific words and terminology, just trying to make everybody feel like this is a new thing. If we really cared about security in the United States on the level, we're not going to shoot a missile at a balloon." So the current events, dude, it's like this. This has been going on a long time. If we care about security, we would deal with the hacks to our cell phones before we would even care about a balloon enough to shoot it down on national television with a missile, which we barely hit, by the way.
Yeah, that's right.
This one statement in particular frustrated me. For someone who markets himself as a journalist, an occupation that requires critical thinking, I mean, again, cybersecurity and air defense can be conducted simultaneously. And by the way, Samsung, Apple, AT&T, Google, anyone who's involved in the communications industry doesn't just get to offload their cybersecurity workload onto the federal government. To be fair to Jeremy, he does have a large catalog of work that I would need to go through more to get a better idea of his reasoning skills, and he does make some good points in this interview. But he's one of the larger personalities in this topic, and this shows a crack in his ability to interpret things and provide thoughtful commentary, which makes me wonder what else might be wrong with conclusions that he has come to. And if he's someone that we want to hold up and say, listen to this guy, he knows what he's talking about, but he's making unsound evaluations, it reflects poorly on the UFO community and the subject itself. Next up is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church, who has a guest on, Richard Dolan, who is also sizable in the UFO community, and they go back and forth for about 2 hours. There's a lot of incredulity also about missiles, and why is the government all of a sudden using UFOs now, or are they trying to water down that term? Richard Dolan thinks the US government is authoritarian.
You know that they've shot video and captured still images of these objects and have not released anything. If it's just commercial balloons gone astray, release the pictures.
That's an interesting point. I would say this. From their point of view, I mean, think about it. You're an authoritarian government that you're in the middle of a revolution against your people.
That is a serious accusation, and you better qualify it. And your explanation can't just be, well, I can't help you if you can't see it. Fuck that. But at one point, Jimmy Church brings up the fact that he can't believe that the government hasn't already found the debris here, and he thinks that they already have it.
To suggest in any way, I don't care if a Cessna goes down, some small plane in the Rocky Mountains in some remote region or the Yukon or whatever. FAA, Canadian authorities, all over that, investigating it, retrieving the debris, laying it out in an airplane hangar and figuring out what's going on. Minutes after they will arrive and get there and somehow do everything that they can. But we shoot down 3, well, we can call it 4, but I'm talking about the 3 this weekend. And to respond back that we shot stuff down with missiles and we may never recover the debris, that's bullshit. It's bullshit. They've got it now. There is no way that they don't.
Jimmy Church is an interesting host. It's an interesting show, but it's frustrating when shows of this size fail to apply even like the barest minimum of reasoning. Just take 5 seconds. Look at the region where these things were shot down, in the Alaska and Yukon specifically. But then add to that the inclement weather, and the probability of them finding this debris is very low. And then there's just a lot of wild speculation. It really is nothing more than entertainment. It's not informational, it's entertainment. Secure Team 10, one of the biggest offenders of them all, and one channel that I really plan on devoting an entire video to because there's just so much poor research. In fact, it's so bad that I really am going to have to dedicate an entire video just to that channel. He starts off with a good sentiment.
I, myself, as soon as I saw this popping off, I told myself I'm going to sit back and watch this thing play out before I post a video, possibly or potentially giving you guys misinformation about the situation, and I really wanted to see where this whole UFOs being shot down thing was going.
That's the responsible reaction, but then he ruins it.
In a nutshell, beginning on February 4th, the US government suddenly decided to take an interest in unknown objects floating in our atmosphere. Strangely, right? I mean, I've been running this channel for 10 years. I've had UFO footage that's been featured on Fox News, the New York Post, CNN, I mean, you name it.
Suddenly, strangely, I'm sure it has absolutely nothing with the US government allowing a Chinese balloon to mosey on over the United States and sensitive military sites unchallenged. I'm sure that has nothing to do with it whatsoever. But Tyler, like most UFO commentators, has also joined many other people on the government conspiracy bandwagon that there must be some ulterior motive to this whole thing. And he wonders if this could be a diversion from the train derailment that was in the news. And
another theory, and a thing that has really weighed heavily on me because I live in the state where it has occurred, and one of the larger theories as to the reason for this sudden UFO appearance / shoot down, total mainstream media smokescreen was due to the recent train derailment right here in Ohio. And from what I'm seeing, and I'm not saying that this is why all of this BS regarding the UFOs and the shoot downs, but it was very strange to me. The media almost unanimously did not report and seemed to have cared less or was almost not reporting it on purpose when this train filled with dangerous chemicals crashed here in Ohio, which, by the way, occurred on February 3rd. So on February 3rd, the chemical spill here in Palestine, Ohio occurred. Then, the very next day on February 4th, Biden orders the military to shoot down the Chinese spy balloon, which then led immediately to a nonstop 24/7 media news coverage blackout, wherein which the only news anybody was hearing about was about these balloons and these UFOs and China and us shooting them down. Now, I know there will be people out there saying, Tyler, there were people reporting on it, Google it right now. Oh, yeah, of course, everyone's reporting on it right now after fellow Ohioans screamed at the top of their lungs for days on end for the media and the government to do something about it and to notice what has occurred. Oh, yeah, of course, they are reporting on it now after the fact, almost 2 weeks later. But make no mistake, on February 3rd, when this occurred, no one, and especially not the mainstream media, was reporting on this in any sort of fashion to the point where you would actually know about it or hear about it on your phone if you're a casual news watcher. It was all UFOs and spy balloons. And the scary thing is that Ohio right now...
So let's do some research and analysis here. All we have to do is look at when the train derailed. Oh, it was at 8:55 in the afternoon. How fast does information take to travel to these mainstream sources? Well, the next day, absolutely, all of the mainstream media companies were reporting on this. And you can Google it. All you have to do is filter by date. But it comes down to what people decide to click on. What is a person in Texas or Canada or New York or Alaska, why would they give a shit about a train derailment in Ohio? They probably are more interested in UFOs flying all over the place. And if you compare these two incidents in Google Trends, this seems to be borne out to some extent. So there's no indication of a cover-up here, just unfortunate timing and people deciding to click on another story. For the moment, I'll just say that one of two things is going on here. Either he truly believes and is just terrible at research and reasoning all this evidence that's come out, or he's pandering to his audience. So I think that's enough examples here. But for many of these UFO personalities that occupy the elevated positions within the community, I have to wonder, what does constitute thorough research? Am I cherry picking clips here? Of course, in the wave of coverage ranging from reasonable speculation to crazy garbage. I picked out a few clips that I think illustrated my main point. And if I'm cherry picking stuff, you can be sure that other people are as well. And it's not doing anything to raise the credibility of this phenomenon. Popularity, sure. Credibility, no. I'll try and boil my main points down here. There's a lack of disinterestedness there's a lack of objectivity when studying this phenomenon, by which I mean people are too emotionally invested in proving the other side wrong or proving themselves right. And this needs to stop because it leads to biased results and doesn't help credibility. Now, there is also this over-reliance on past government misconduct, conspiratorial thinking, to explain things that could very well have mundane answers. And we just need to look at each case individually. I should probably provide the links to the clips that I used because they're not totally incoherent. There are some good points in here. And I'm not saying there aren't, but they're interspersed with a lot of nonsense, which I think is where the danger comes in. Because some of these people are saying reasonable things, but then that lures people in, lowers their guard, gives them a sense of credibility, and then by subtle degrees, people are led down a path to nowhere. And then we end up at the same place that we were before, where the average person seeing this, once again, is shunning the topic and its proponents. As promised, here's my final opinion on this and why I think things unfolded as they did. There was a Chinese spy balloon that was allowed to coast over the United States unchallenged, including over sensitive military sites. The Biden administration is getting flack from the public and elected officials on both sides of the aisle. But you know the Republicans, they're going to make an especially big deal out of this since it's a Democrat in office. And for added emphasis, on February 9th, the United States House of Representatives voted 419-0 to condemn China over this balloon. So this is a major PR nightmare. Now the administration, with egg on its face, opens up the search parameters for airborne objects, which they find. And 1, they want to prevent further Chinese spycraft from operating. 2, they want to try to reestablish itself in a positive light to the American public. And 3, of course, they want to show foreign powers that our airspace is secure. So then we have 3 objects that were shut down, seemingly benign and unmanned based on observations from the pilots, but they could still have been gathering data. So that's why we have AIM-9 missiles being used, because they are the safest option that allowed the pilots to take these craft down and avoid potentially colliding with the craft itself or any debris. And as to why these things were not able to be located, if we look at North Alaska, where the first object was downed 10 miles off the coast, look at where the nearest military bases are. They're not going to get there anytime soon. That's just to know that's not going to happen. What about the Yukon? This is remote, rough terrain. And then just imagine snow everywhere. It's reasonable to assume that finding anything is going to be quite difficult. Basically, all 3 of these objects that were shot down were small, hard to see from the pilot's perspective, and difficult to track because of their small radar cross sections. This, combined with inclement weather, the remoteness of the shootdowns, and water moving some of the debris off, is why they have yet to be found. So there you go. That's my opinion on why things unfolded as they did. So feel free to critique me as harshly as you wish, especially in the comment section. But that about wraps it up. Peace. Oh, by the way, if you're interested, checking out some of my other stuff, I talked about giants in my last video. Or if you're into the more narrative style type video, check this guy out. He's pretty good too.